I hear a lot of people complain about micromanagement. That's a leader staying in the cop role too long
Mm.
and maybe never going into the coach role. On the flip side, there's leaders who aren't there to help. They don't offer any sort of guidance, and they've gone to an extreme version of the consultant role. So sort of a laissez-faire form of leadership. But this paradigm helps a leader, be there exactly how their employee needs them to be there.
Jason Vonk, welcome to the Executive Dad Podcast.
Nick, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man, I am stoked. I know we've been connected for a few months. You are a fellow Sherpa Executive Coach. So I've been watching you and admiring your work on LinkedIn. So I'm pumped to dive into your leadership principles and learn more about you.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, for sure. So can we start? You've got kind of a unique career experience. Just kind of give me your background. I know you've spent a lot of time working with high performing individuals. So I would love to hear and share more.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I was coaching gymnastics while putting myself through college. I started that in high school, but I was also getting a degree in computer science and mathematics.
Okay.
And I had some internship opportunities in IT, another in with like an aerospace engineering company. But I just loved coaching and I loved working with people. And I thought, I'm going to do this for a few years and then get a real job. But I ended up sticking with it. I moved from Michigan to Colorado and, of course, loved the outdoors and loved the coaching. So I've always been drawn to people, which is one of the reasons it was hard for me to go into just computers because at least the entry level jobs are lots of coding and not necessarily a lot of people leadership. So
Right.
coaching was people leadership right away. I mean, as soon as I started coaching, it wasn't long before I was developing staff and coaching athletes. And I did that for 30 years in that sport.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. So high level gymnastics coaching for 30 years. I mean,
Yep.
I guess in today's time, right, with AI, we won't
Mhm.
get into your thoughts on our AI, the new people. Like, how do we have those conversations? What does that look like? Maybe it's different these days.
Yeah.
But during that 30 years, you've also become a parent and you're a father of five boys. Also, I think unique in your experience with five young men running around the house. You've got Lincoln, 15, Ben, 13, Wilson, 11, Jackson, 9, and Joey, 6. Summarize a day in the life of a father of five boys. What does that even look like?
Well, having just boys is its own thing. I have family who has a boy and some girls, but it's like each added boy sort of multiplies on the craziness. And so we have to make sure that we have really firm rules, but not too many rules. If we had
Okay.
too many rules, we'd be policing them all the time. So it's really clear boundaries and keep them busy, keep them active, keep doing things. That's the day in the life. And I always tell people that I should have invested in drywall a long time ago.
That's classic. So it sounds like, a term I picked up in the Marine Corps was controlled chaos. It sounds like that's what we're operating with.
We are operating with that every single day, including about 30 minutes before I was on this with you.
I'm sure it's nonstop. So with that, before we get into your three leadership principles that have been impactful for you, how do you find the time in your day? Five boys, you've got a career, you've got a relationship, and you've got, a life that you love. I know you do love the outdoors. How do you find time? How do you build in structure to facilitate success for yourself?
Yeah, I can honestly say I've wrestled with that ever since my first son was born because it really matters to me to be present as a dad, but also to excel in my career. And so it's been a question in each season. Does this career path, does this responsibilities within my job, does where my kids are in their life, does it all work out? What adjustments do I need to make? I've been always asking that question. So there's a balance issue that's constantly going on. Sometimes it's a daily balance, sometimes it's a seasonal balance, sometimes it's
Right.
I've actually made a few career shifts because of that to find the balance again. From I guess I would say from the daily perspective, kind of weekly, I think the most important thing with the family is to get one-on-one time with each kid on the calendar. That probably ends up being about once a month, once
Okay.
every 6 weeks. But with five kids, it's hard to, a lot of things could go unseen if we stay in a group all the time. So my wife
Right.
and I take turns with some one-on-ones to make sure that we can balance that. And then it's certainly the job things have to go on the calendar too, because there's always things that come up with your job that I have to be at this no matter what, or this is outside of my normal work hours. So managing the calendar becomes really important.
Yeah, I want to pull on two strings that you shared there. Number one is that seasonality of life. And I think that's important to remember. And the second string I was going to pull on was like giving yourself grace, right? There are
Mhm.
obviously things that come up with five boys and a career and career changes and a relationship where you just have to like, hey, I'm doing my best, right? We are leaning in as a team, your partner and yourself, your wife and you, as well as, I'm doing what I can right now to be the best for my career, for myself, for my partner, for my kids. But that season, allowing yourself to ebb and flow with those priorities. And I love that you shared that. Like, okay, this is a season where I need to lean in to my career a little bit. And I understand I'm going to give myself the grace of the schedule of one-on-one. It may not be monthly, but it's going to be every 6 weeks now. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I can only imagine how you've had the ebbs and flows of feeling. I know even as a dad myself of an 11-year-old stepson and a 16-month-old daughter, like, oh, I want to be there more. And it's like pulling me, I need to invest here, but I want to be here. I can only imagine the lessons that you could share in that realm. So I appreciate that little share. So Jason, let's get in to your three leadership principles. Let's kick it off with number one.
Yeah. So the first one is a paradigm that I've heard multiple times. I honestly can't tell you who maybe the original author of this idea is, but it's the idea that as a parent, we move from cop to coach to consultant. So the idea in this paradigm, which I'm going to give a little twist on in a second, but I'll give you the overall idea. The idea is that when our kids are really little, we play the role of cop, which I think has two things. Number one, put the barricades up like police officers might for a road if there's an event. You've got your barricades, you've got your rules, you've got your things that keep your kids in certain boundaries. And then within those boundaries, you're policing and making sure that they know what is right and wrong, safe from dangerous, and those kind of things. As your kids get older, you take the role of coach. We're thinking like a sports coach here. I was a gymnastics coach, so nobody does a backflip on a balance beam without a coach. They're just not going to get there without somebody walking alongside them, giving them the work to do day to day. But the idea there is the coach is not the one doing the work, right? I mean, when I
Right.
coached gymnastics, the gymnast did the gymnastics, I did the coaching. And so the same with parenting. There's a phase where you're coaching, you're coming alongside your kids and being a guide. And then the consultant metaphor is that you're there and they're glad to go to you for their questions. And that's in this paradigm is sort of later on in life. Here's my twist. I think that that's actually not just in the phases of life. I think each stage has that.
Okay.
So I think of my 15-year-old now, I'll go back to when he was 4. He likes independence. So when we would take him to the beach, we lived close to the beach. There was a seawall on either side, about 60, 70 yards between the seawall. I would sit back where I could see everything and let him roam. I taught him how to swim, so I did some coaching in the swimming area. Now I'm like maybe consultant. I'm watching back if he has problems. If he can come to me. If I see something, I can go out to him. So I think that each stage has that role. Now he's 15. I'm the cop when it comes to his cell phone. We've got Apple like settings set up so that he can only access certain things, certain times, certain hours, certain limits. We have a contract. There's a place his phone goes at 9 o'clock at night. So we have all these things. I'm the cop, but he's leaning into these school opportunities where he gets to do model UN and go to the state capitol and practice what it would be like to pass a bill. I'm just consultant. He might run some ideas past me, but I'm not going to get too involved in that. I'm going to give him the space to grow, and I'm going to be that person. And I think what's important here for an executive is that we really do the same thing with employees, right? There's tasks we've just delegated that they need us to sort of police to be right in there. Then we're coaching them. Then we're stepping way back and letting them do their thing. So I think it's a really valuable paradigm.
Yeah, I think that is a beautiful share. And what I'm hearing is instead of it being linear, right? Cop, then coach, then consultant, this is dynamic, right? If I'm delegating, if I'm setting expectations, and maybe I think my team is ready, I'm in that consultative phase, but maybe they're not meeting expectations. I need to step back in and provide coaching, or maybe even I'm establishing more clear boundaries as a cop. So we
That's
can
right.
ebb and flow and flex in that paradigm.
That's right.
Man, I love that. And I can see it with my 16-month-old daughter as well. I think I'm
That's
ready for a little more consulting, and I think she's ready for it too. So we'll see how that goes.
Let me make a note on that with in the workplace. I hear a lot of people complain about micromanagement. That's a leader staying in the cop role too long
Mm.
and maybe never going into the coach role. On the flip side, there's leaders who aren't there to help. They don't offer any sort of guidance, and they've gone to an extreme version of the consultant role. So sort of a laissez-faire form of leadership. But this paradigm helps a leader, be there exactly how their employee needs them to be there.
Right. And what would you say, I'm a leader in the workplace. I'm not sure what phase I should be in. How can I
Mm.
figure out like what does my team need? What does, the business need from me to create that positive impact?
Such a great question. I think maybe the first thing to do is ask that employee, ask them some questions about their readiness, their confidence, how much help they need, what their experience is of you as a leader. That's one thing. The other thing you can look is the results. If you're not getting the results you want, it might be because you're in the wrong role. You might be micromanaging it and the person doesn't have the freedom to get the results, or you might not be giving them the support and the help that they need.
Got it. So building some self-awareness, asking questions, getting feedback, which I think we may hit on here in a moment, are
Yep.
all key to understanding where you are now and where maybe you need to be to create that positive impact. So with that, let's segue leadership principle number two.
Yeah, that's having a feedback conversation. And that's a paradigm shift from giving feedback. So giving
Yep.
feedback looks like, hey, Nick, I signed this task to you, and I'd really like to see you change the way that you do this part. And I need it done a little faster. So I walk into the conversation, I start telling you the problems I see and asking you to fix them the way that I want you to fix them.
Mm.
And the shift there of a feedback conversation is probably first of all, we put it on the calendar, right? I assign you a task and I say, hey, in a week, we're going to have a feedback conversation, next Tuesday at 10 a.m. for just 15 minutes. And I lead that conversation by saying, hey, what's going well? What's working? What else? I get lots of feedback from you about how you see the project going well. Then I ask you, what would you do differently? What do you want to improve? I get your feedback about the improvements. Now, at this point in time in the conversation, you have probably said everything that I might have said to you.
Right.
And if you haven't, the follow-up is, may I offer a suggestion? And then as a leader, I add my suggestion, being careful not to overwhelm. So maybe one suggestion at the most two at this point in time. And that's the outline of a feedback conversation. It reduces anxiety. A lot of times people actually look forward to it because not only are they getting feedback, but they're getting an opportunity to have a conversation with their leader
Right.
and point out their positive performances that their leader might not be seeing.
Yeah, for sure. I love a good framework that's probably going to come through in a lot of these conversations. But anything we can build structure, build in discipline in how we approach situations to allow for that freedom. And I think that, feedback as a conversation is a beautiful depiction of that, allowing you to have that structure. Hey, Jason, go ahead. We're going to have a feedback conversation in a week. It's scheduled for this time, so they are prepared, right? So it allows that initiative and nervousness to fall away, like you pointed out, and then allowing them to be empowered to
Yeah,
lead that conversation. Like think of the value, because the first thing that comes to mind when you think about feedback in maybe a not great environment is feedback is negative,
that's
right?
right.
So this, framework I think is amazing. And how do you see that playing out as a dad? Let's turn the tables. We've now focused as an executive, as a leader in the workplace. How can we use this in the framework for parenting?
Yeah. And let me say this, it's really a coaching paradigm. It's asking questions, it's letting the person that you're coaching be the one giving the answers. And so I remember the first time I tried it with my 15-year-old son, he loved it because he didn't feel accused by me. He came up with the answers. He was so motivated to actually make the change because it was his idea.
Right.
So it works great with teenagers. With the littler ones, you have to choose a conversation that they truly would be able to engage in,
Right.
truly be able to say, to think about at their age and their level. But I still use it. My youngest is 6. I'll still use it with him. He might be out with a friend and things don't go well. And I'm like, hey, tell me about the interaction. What did go well? Where did things go wrong? What did you own? What could you have done differently? Because usually they come back and they say, so and so is mean to me. But if you ask them what they own, what they could have done differently, how they could have handled the situation better, usually they can come up with something.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And again, allowing them to be in control of the situation, take that ownership, and then the buy-in on the back end, right? When it's their idea, you're like, hey, that sounds like a good plan. Let's go with that. Whether it's the kids or in the workplace. So that's amazing. If you didn't write that down and you're listening, I think you should have. Feedback is a conversation. Now, moving on, Jason, number three.
Yeah. Number 3 is weakness mountain. It's very closely related to this feedback conversation. Weakness mountain is a Sherpa tool, so both you and I have been trained in this. It's a similar idea, uh, as far as you lead the other person through a conversation about a weakness that they have. So I can use my 15-year-old son. A weakness of his is doing the laundry. So weakness mountain is just the first level would be admitting it, and maybe we've labeled it something bigger, like we could say lack of responsibility, right? So I might say to my son, all right, Lincoln, the weakness is lack of responsibility. What does that look like? So that's the next step up the mountain. You're finding out, when does it happen,
Mhm.
so that it's more specific. It's not this general irresponsibility, but it's more specific. So in Lincoln's case, you might say, I'm not getting my laundry done. My floor is a little bit of a mess, and there's times where I need some clothes that day that I can't have because they're dirty. So the third thing up the mountain is replacement behavior. So I might say to Lincoln, well, how do you want to replace this behavior? What do you want to do differently? And he might say, I need to make Tuesday nights and Saturday nights my laundry nights. And so we have a replacement behavior. And then the final step at the top of the mountain is evaluating it. Is this working? So
Right.
we would schedule a feedback conversation, Lincoln and I, for 2 weeks later, and he'd say, all right, Lincoln, how's Tuesday and Saturday laundry going? And then we could have a conversation and we could make adjustments.
Yeah.
Now we can do that generally with somebody who talks too much, or opposite, doesn't speak up in a meeting, or I mean any weakness that you're running into in the workplace, can have this conversation with somebody. And it's surprising sometimes they'll label it one thing. For example, I had a client who labeled something procrastination. And in the end, it was just coming down to they needed to ask somebody a question so they could keep moving forward from it. So the weakness was actually speaking up.
Mm.
but it
Interesting.
resulted in procrastination.
Right.
So digging into it.
So procrastination was the byproduct of the behavior of not speaking up.
That's right.
Got it. So what, just to go back through the steps to make sure everyone was able to hear those. So we've got labeling the
Yep.
weakness
That's
and
right.
then identifying when it happens. When does this show
Right.
up for you?
That's right.
Step number three, we're almost at the top of the mountain. We've got the replacement behavior. What do you want to change, or how are we going to change this behavior, a replacement behavior?
That's
And
right.
then number four, having that feedback as a conversation. Is that replacement behavior actually creating a positive impact?
That's right.
And then you can go back down the mountain if necessary, right? Hey, we need to take a step back here. That's not working. What could work?
Yeah. And this is
Yeah.
so powerful, especially in the workplace, actually, and with kids, because a lot of times we complain about somebody's weakness, like, whatever that might be. And or we might say in a 360 review at the end of the year, yeah, you've got this weakness of irresponsibility. Well, I want you to work on that. It's just too general.
Right.
Taking up weakness mountain gets it very specific. It gives you something you can measure. It gives you something you can talk about in a feedback conversation later, and you can actually get traction on it.
Yeah, for sure. And shameless plug for Sherpa Executive Coaching, where we focus on identifying weakness and
Right.
creating positive behavior change. A lot of people want to shy away, like, oh, I'm just going to lean into my strengths. I get it. That's going to get you to a certain level, but there are weaknesses holding you back. And
That's
I
right.
appreciate you bringing Weakness Mountain to it. And
That's right.
again, that framework, step by step, creating that positive change.
Yep.
Okay, so three beautiful principles. I hope you guys took away each of those. They were all three powerful. The cop, coach, and consultant paradigm. Feedback is a conversation, and then walking up Weakness Mountain. Jason, I really appreciate those. Now we're going to transition into a little bit of a different phase of the conversation. These are going to be three questions that every guest on the show is going to answer. And the last one's a little unique. So I'll explain that one when I get there. But stealing a little bit of this from Tim Ferriss,
Hmm.
if you were able to send one text message to all of the executive dads who want to lean into leadership and they were all going to read it, what would that message be that you're going to send to them?
Yeah. I mean, establish your values and your priorities before you take on any leadership role so that you have something to compare. Is this what I want my life to look like? Does this match what's most important to me? A lot of times values end up being, something written on a wall, maybe something we wrote in a journal. Making them real is actually making decisions based on them and making sure we have habits or practices in our life that express those values.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you do that? How have you done that in the past? Because, a lot of people, they journal or they're like, hey, we're going to have an offsite and we're going to talk about values. And they come back with the product and it's like integrity. And it's like, obviously, we want to have integrity. Like, how have you established like your values?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one value that's always forced me to realign my priorities is I've always taken one day off a week.
Okay.
And so now I'm not saying there's not weeks, there's certainly weeks where I end up working 2 weeks straight through. It hasn't been any, sort of a religiously followed value. But what happens is when I start getting so full that I feel like I need to do a little work on that day, that tells me, man, I need to make an adjustment.
Hmm.
Or it also tells me I'm probably not getting the time with my kids I need. So when I have that for sure one day off, now it's great when you get Saturday and Sunday off or whatever it is, you get your 2 days off. But I've always, and even within that, if I have 2 days off of work, I make sure one of those is a work day at home, but not both of them a work day at home. So I
Got it.
truly get quality time with my kids and time for me. So that has been a value that I followed the entire way through my career. And it's not just been a rule to follow, but it has helped almost be like a thermometer that tells me, what the temperature is of my busyness in life.
Yeah, for sure. If you feel like you can't take it, there's something maybe out of balance,
That's
right?
right.
You need to reevaluate. I love that. All right, question number two. What is one habit or mindset shift that you have practiced that has created a positive impact on your ability to be a leader both in your career and at home?
That's a great question. I started leaning into this probably more recently. I would say that I've always wanted to practice this, but more recently, I've made it a habit, and that's curiosity. So it's so easy to already have the plan in mind as a leader, or what it might look like to spend time with your kid in mind, or you might already have the answer in your head. But going into a conversation with curiosity helps you stay present. It helps you be willing to co-create with somebody else in the room. In conflict, it helps you be willing to understand, there might be pieces to the story I don't know. So I found that curiosity is really helpful. And I recently picked up an exercise probably within the last year for this. You literally just pick an object in the room, look around. I'm looking at an outlet right now, and you start to ask yourself, what don't I know about that outlet? Well, when I think about it, I sure don't know exactly how electricity works. I don't know which parts are metal, which parts are plastic. I'm not an electrician. I don't even know what to turn off if I want to replace that. I don't know where the hot spots in the world for manufacturing an outlet is. Now, in my day-to-day life, I feel like an expert. All I have to do is plug something in and it works. But if I stop and think about it, I realize, man, there's a lot I don't know. And switching into that mind starts to go, oh, in this conflict, there's a lot I don't know. When I go to discipline one of my sons, there's a lot I don't know. I need to stay curious before I fully get into the discipline in the situation.
Right. Wow. That's beautiful. And just thinking of, you said disciplined conversations or tough conversations in your career, like leading with curiosity. We often talk about, put yourself in the other person's shoes, but I think just stepping into that curious mindset, what more do I need to understand before I act? And we think about that, like the power of silence and listen, think, communicate, and taking that pause, right? What more do I need to know about this situation? That's amazing. I appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing that.
curiosity is that pathway to putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes.
Right.
And putting ourselves in someone's shoes, I think, is the next step is empathy. So it goes curiosity, putting ourselves in someone's shoes, empathy. And those are all really important aspects of leadership.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, this last question to close out the show. So you are going to have the opportunity to give me a question after we stop recording for the next guest. So
Ooh,
you being episode one or episode two, I was episode one. This is coming from me, but your question will go into my journal. And then the next person who comes on the show will answer your question.
yeah,
All right. So
like that.
as a leader, both in your career and at home, in the most simple way possible, how do you want to be remembered?
Ooh, that's a deep one. If I put it briefly, I would say that I put people first, that I
What
didn't
is
let
that?
results, my own agenda, anything else get in front of people, that I truly cared about the person in front of me, giving them my best attention and caring about their next steps, their career path, their future, who they're becoming, what their dreams and hopes are.
Yeah. Such a powerful tool as a leader in the workplace, caring about others, and obviously at home, it's so important being present, like you mentioned. Jason, it has been an honor to have you as the first guest on the show. I'm excited to share your message of leadership and empathy and curiosity and great feedback with the world. Where can people follow you, learn more if they want to work with you as an executive coach? Where can they find out more?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. I post just about every day. I really enjoy engaging people with conversations on their posts and my posts. So Jason Vonk on LinkedIn. I have my website is inspiredleadershipcoaching.com. I know that's a mouthful. Inspiredleadershipcoaching.com. And that's a place that you can find out about what I do or get an email to me from there.
Very cool. We'll make sure to share all of those in the show notes. So if you guys are interested in following Jason, which I highly recommend, I know I love to engage with Jason on LinkedIn. We will put that in the show notes. So please check it out. Give the podcast a follow as well. And if you like what you hear, give us a 5-star review. We appreciate you listening today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Nick.